Hello guys, good day. Now for today's video lecture, we'll be discussing all about Global South. Now, when we talk about Global South, it's basically a part of our discussion on global stratification or global divide. So when we talk about global divide in globalization, wherein we could now classify that the globe is divided into several classifications or group. Now, for instance, would now be in terms of economic development, wherein we have global, or rather, developing, undeveloped, then or develop, wherein we have your first world, second world, or third world. Or in this case, we'll be discussing on global south and north divide, wherein the globe is divided into north and south. And the second lesson or PowerPoint would now be on Asian regionalization. So our globe is divided into regions, and one prospect when it comes to globalization would now be when it comes to modernity, wherein Asia has been a center point of globalization. But that is another video lecture that we'll be discussing. Now, our main point would now be on Global South. Now, this is just a new trend now. So here are the following literatures that we'll be studying, wherein we have Lisandro Claudio. This is the main literature locating the Global South. Then we also have Emma Mawdsley, the Southernization of Development, wherein Global South has been deemed to be a new rising economic power, or rather an economic, political, and social power in globalization. But as well, if there are other literatures, I'll just include them for us to understand what is now, or to define what is now Global South. So your Global South has been a new concept that has been defined and redefined in your 1960s and your 1990s. Now, basically, it is a new global stratification. Now, typically, in older stratification, or rather in traditional approaches, the globe has been stratified into three levels. So this has been enumerated by Arturo Escobar, by Immanuel Wallerstein, and other neo-Marxist thinkers. No, so when we talk about Marxism, basically it's all about conflict, exploitation, etc. Just to give you an idea, diba? Yung core, semi-periphery, periphery, and your periphery, that the first world countries, or your core, basically exploits and sucks up yung resources ng ating mga semi-periphery and your periphery. Now, before going dito, I hope you could see now the pointer, the mouse. Before going to global north and your global south, di ba? One stratification natin would not be, for instance, when it comes to westernization or colonialization, or colonialism, wherein we have your European and Western powers, or exactly Western powers, including European, or rather powerful European nations such as Germany, United Kingdom, and France, and including your United States, no? They have colonized some parts of our world, such as Philippines, some nations in Africa, no? So we have your developed, then your first world, then your western regions. Now, yung bagong concept na i-discuss natin ngayon, which is basically global north and your global south, which is synonymously, although not to generalize, could not be equated with yung sabi natin kanina. Global north is basically yung powerful states or nations or regions natin eh. We have your developed, your first world, or simply yung mga western countries natin. So western would now include your United States and your powerful European nations. While on the other hand, we have global south. So itong global south natin would now be yung developing. So this could be classified as your second world, or your undeveloped, or your third world nation. Yung second world nations natin could be classified before in your post-Cold War era would now be yung mga communist states natin. Tapos yung mga third world natin would now include, kunyari, yung ASEAN countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. Then as well, yung mga former colonies na ating Western imperial nations. So kunyari, pag Spain, dito include yung Latin American, then Philippines. So that is basically not basically to generalize, to define global south, kasi global south later dun sa literature ni Claudio would now include that global south is basically metaphorical. It is only used as symbol. Now, looking dito sa map, no, so ito yung basically could now generalize the stratification, or rather the divide of your global north and your global south. So hindi siya ganun ka concrete, hindi siya ganun ka objective. It's quite subjective in the nature kasi metaphorical siya, no. So the blue parts, or the blue regions, or your countries would now pertain to your global north. So United States, Canada, yung Europe natin, then yung currently Russian Federation natin. Then we could also see Eastern, or rather Asian countries such as Japan, then your South Korea, and we could also see Taiwan. Nakikita din natin, we have your Israel, no? So yan yung ano natin. And as well, Singapore. Then the red ones would now pertain to your global south. So yung Latin America natin, including Mexico, South Africa, or rather Africa to, sorry. Then your Asia. Then we have Australia, which belongs to your global north, no? Now looking dun sa una nating definition, but this is not the concrete, diba? Developed, then your first world. We have Australia, then New Zealand. These are developed countries, although looking into your geographical location, nakalocate siya sa south, but pertains to your global north. Now, this is your economic regions pertaining more likely, ano siya, we could not conclude global north, yung mga economic dominant countries natin, no? Yan. However, some things would now change, no? Yan. To further understand global north, may I provide the literature of Emma Mawdsley. So actually, this slide is it pertains to yung dun sa literature ni Emma Mawdsley. Maintindihan natin lalo yan pagdating kay Claudio. Now basically ganito, no. Yan yung ano natin. Now okay. Now yung una nating definition, global north are economic dominant countries. They are developed, they are first world, they are western. So sabi na natin sa ekonomiya and including power, sila makapangyarihan. Yung traditional approach natin nun, looking into a colonial point of view, yung global north natin dahil sila yung pinakamalalakas when it comes to ekonomiya, pinakamayaman. Now, in a stratification point of view, ang moral obligation nila, it's more likely an obligation, is that dahil mayaman sila, they provide aid and assistance, tulong sa mga global south. This is in a form of, let us say, the most common term would now be charity. Yan, tutulungan nila. And this brings on the idea of Adam Smith, no, yung utilitarianism natin, or in a more specific terminology, yung invisible hand, di ba? Ganito yung discussion natin all about the invisible hand in political philosophy. Ang argument kasi dito ni Adam Smith is that kung yumayaman ka, dumadami yung funds mo, it gives you a moral obligation, which is in your belief na mayaman ka, you have to give more towards those who are needy, those who are need the most. O tama ba yung grammar? Hindi ko alam. Yung mas nakangailangan. And that is moral obligation. So, example of your rich countries would now be United States, United Kingdom, for instance. Dahil mayaman ka na, it's your obligation to provide assistance to your global south. Ano yung assistance niyan? Kunyari, ito yung justification natin when it comes to benevolent assimilation. To provide civilization, technology, to introduce technology to your global south. O kunyari, kung nagkabagyo, di ba? When it comes to calamities or disasters, di ba? Ang more likely, ang unang nag-approach naman when it comes to assistance would now be global north. Or economic assistance when it comes to investments. Majority of your capitalistic entities ay nakalocate sa United States. Sa United Kingdom or even in Japan. So instances is that when it comes to investment, we now provide investment towards global south in order to give opportunity for your global south to develop. Now, yung common notion kasi or traditional approach kasi dito is that your global north needs to provide assistance or needs to assist yung global south because there is a sympathy. Dahil superior ka, it is already in your mindset to assist yung mga inferior states such as Africa or Philippines. This is just an example. Basta sabihin nyo na I'm generalizing that Africa is inferior. That is now the traditional approach. Yan. However, yung justification dito ni Mawdsley, unti-unti na siyang nag-iba, nagta-transform. And we have now this thing called Southernization. Now, itong Southernization is quite different, no? That there are some southern countries or states na nagde-develop. Now, yung notion kasi ng Southernization, unlike with traditional approach like Global North na it's purely based on aid and assistance, ang gustong sabihin ng Southernization is when it comes to economic cooperation. So for instance, ang justification natin sa economic cooperation is there are some southern countries na nagdevelop. Now, to give you on the literature ni Emma Mawdsley, we have the BRICS. Now, BRICS stands for Brazil, R stands for, ano yung ibig sabihin na R? Nakalimutan ko na R, sorry. Brazil, wherein we have India, we have China, then we have South Africa. I forgot the R, sorry. Ipapaskill ko na lang dyan, no? So we have the R. Now, itong R na to, yung BRICS na to, is basically, they are the first countries who develop in the South, no? Yan yung according dun sa literature ni Mawdsley. Ngayon na na-develop ngayon sila, ang ginagawa ngayon nila is that, okay, now, dahil naging develop kami ngayon, tutulong kami ngayon. Tutulong ngayon kami sa kapwa naming southern countries. Pero itong tulong na to is not in terms of moral obligation. But basically, tutulong sila ngayon kasi they have empathy. Etong empathy ngayon guys is nung panahon din namin noon, naranasan namin yung kahirapan. So technically, both south to south countries yung unang south who now achieve or experience development will now assist to yung mga southern countries nila who are still currently developing. So sasabihin nila is dahil naranasan din namin from the term mutual experience na naghirap, tutulungan namin ngayon kayo mga southern countries dahil because of empathy, because of mutual experiences. Dito is more likely aid and assistance eh. Makikita pa natin yung superiority and inferiority complex, no? Unlike dito, hindi na ganun eh, kasi more likely equal ngayon yung tulungan. So nakikita natin dito is development partnership, not as aid but opportunity. So unlike dito, no, yung United States tutulong sa Pilipinas, just an example, in the sense na may moral obligation. Pero nakikita natin dito, tutulungan naman kayo Philippines, pero in return may kapalit. And this could be latently or could be obviously. Tutulungan namin kayo, but basically, ipasa nyo yung Visiting Forces Agreement, di ba? Na example, ganun, or when it comes to trade agreements. Unlike dito sa Southernization, sa China, could be an example. Tutulungan namin kayo kasi yung China ngayon is one of the investors sa mga African nations natin, no? So sasabihin nila opportunity to, so more likely it would now be economic partners. So ganun, I forgot the R na nasa dila ko lang, nakalimutan ko na. Brazil, India, China, then South Africa. I forgot the R. Ipapaskill ko na lang mamaya kung na-search ko, no. Yan, my apologies, no. Now yun yung kay Emma Mawdsley, no. But we could now understand Global South in the literature of Claudio. So yung kay Claudio actually, this came from his journal entitled Locating the Global South, no? So na-define yung Global South more likely in a perspective of a Filipino. Now, I forgot to include this in the PowerPoint. Pero sinasabi kasi ni Claudio is something like this, no? He started with the Starbucks argument, no? Okay, Starbucks is basically Western kasi United States yan, no? Now, paglabas mo ng kunyari sa United States, paglabas mo sa Starbucks in New York, for instance, you could see now the total development in a community. So makita mo kunyari sa New York, paglabas mo, pareho yung level. But unlike with southern countries, Philippines and India, where he mentioned this one, kunyari no, may franchise ang Starbucks in Manila. Paglabas mo ng Starbucks sa Manila, you could still now see kunyari yung mga natin, beggars, yung mga bata natin, no. So nakikita natin nagkaroon ng inequality, and that could now posit or provide us an analogy all about Global South, that there's already inequality. And basically, ganun naman yung nakikita natin, yung one of the main G's of Global South, eh. More likely your developed countries than your undeveloped countries. Now, ganito, going back to your colonialism and modernity. Now, your Global South could be traced back in colonialism. By the way, I'm just providing G's, and the examples that I'll be providing are more likely my own examples, no. Although yung mga nakalagay dito are mentioned in the literature of Claudio. So it's all started with colonialism. So Global South is a product of Western imagination, and it could be traced back with colonialism. With your geographical location, your developed countries or yung mga colonizers natin came from Europe and later your United States. It exactly posits on the northern part of your globe. So more likely lang lumalabas daw dito is that civilization all started with your states that are coming from the north. Hegel stated as a counter argument with globalization, or rather in colonialization, my apologies, is that it posits geographical underpinnings na may geographical and in the same time racial pinnings. Kunyari ang argument dito ni Hegel is that yung nangyari kasi sa colonization, although he criticizes this one, that kasi Hegel is a proponent of dialectics, no? So ang argument niya dito is that more likely it's based on racial underpinnings, no? So yung mga nasa north would now be Caucasians, or to be exact, yung mga colonizers natin, kunyari mga Caucasians, your Englishmen, your Americans, di ba? So likely when we try to look into your demographical profile na dating dito, yung mga blacks natin, yung mga Latinos natin, yung mga Asians natin, so nagkakaroon ulit ng inequality or stratification, no? Or rather, we have this French civilized So colonization was, although this is a justification of colonization and how global south already has been developed as a concept now. So these French civilizatrices basically justified that colonization was a necessary tool for the spread of civilization, which is sort of like a very bad definition of global south now. So this has been the best example would be kay William McKinley, benevolent assimilation. If you're studying history 1, no? So more likely, bakit sinakop ng mga Amerikano ang Pilipinas is basically from the policy of William McKinley. Before the time of Rizal, or during the time of Rizal, before Philippine independence to be exact, nasulat na tong William McKinley. But basically, it's like a prophetic literature, rather policy that United States has the rightful claim to colonize quote-unquote inferior countries such as the Philippines because they have this moral obligation, yung kanina kay Emma Mawdsley, no, that they have to spread civilization, to introduce education, technology. Yun yung according daw dito, no? Yan yung kay William McKinley. At dahil dito, so nagkakaroon ngayon ng stratification between your northern hemisphere countries such as United States as more civilized, and they provided that image na sila mismo, kunyari yung hero, because they have introduced this concept of civilization towards southern regions such as Philippines, then Latin America. Then another definition would now be neoliberalism, which we already mentioned this one in global economy. But just to provide you or to bridge out towards global south, no? Ang sinasabi kasi ng neoliberalism or yung critics against neoliberalism is that kaya nagkaroon ng stratification kasi yung mga western countries, western or rather northern countries, they have forced yung mga southern countries natin such as Philippines and Latin America, they have forced them to embed liberal or neoliberal policies into their government, into their state. So if force nila liberalize, di ba, free trade. And in an exploitative point of view na, okay, free market na, para makapasok ngayon yung mga markets na ibebenta namin from northern states, they will now sell it at a very expensive price. But in the as well, pero nagkabaliktad yung argument ko doon, no? They will now get yung raw resources then, resources from your southern states at a very cheaper price, pero pagdating dun sa final product, kasi they will now generate yung mga resources from southern states, parang ano siya, core then periphery, no? So pagdating dun sa northern states, yung southern rather yung mga raw products from your south countries na binili nila ng cheap, now they will now convert it into final products. Ibebenta ngayon nila na mas mahal sa mga southern countries. And that is how exploitation takes place. At dahil doon, yung mayaman yung northern countries at mas na-exploit yung ating southern countries, doon na nagkakaroon ng global inequality. I will not delete this one, pero I hope yung I will not cut this one, pero I hope na-gets nyo yung point. I'll just provide something, no, yung image. So doon nagkakaroon ngayon ng inequality between your global north or your northern countries than your southern countries. Then as well, we have modernization. This is another concept that would now clearly define global south, no? So when we talk about modernization, it's simply transformation. And obviously, sino magdadala ng modernity? It would now be your northern countries such as United States. Economically, socially, politically, and technologically. I have to provide technologically as well, no? But for us to understand modernity, no? So ganito yung modernity, no? So modernity is basically an orientation or a concept of a person. Now through a pen, yan, ganito siya, no? Yan, ganyan yung modernity. And I will as well include modernization, no? Modernity is basically like yung discussion natin on globalization versus globality. So from the term NIT, it refers to a status. So it's a concept of a human. May stages siya. Now yung modernization, it's a unilinear projection. So one way lang siya, pataas siya. Actually pataas pa nga siya, ganun dapat na pataas siya towards a particular vision in the future. Now who will na provide this modernization, this modernity? Now in the argument of Claudio, it would not be your global north countries. So sila daw magpro-provide ng modernity. Who has the technological capabilities? United States. Yun yung argument niya, yun yung argument ni Claudio. Culture, politically, di ba? Yan yung lalabas. Now as well, no, according to the literature, I have to mention this one kasi nakalagay dun sa literature. And for us to understand deeper yung konteksto natin all about globalization, no. So for instance, no, I'll just to brief it up, no, para hindi na tayo my information overload, no. So for instance, Rostow's modernization theory, no. So again, going back with modernity, no. So United States with an S, I forgot to include this one. Again, a northern country plays an active role in promoting modernization in other countries. Technology, but aside from technology, Apple, etc., machines, but not just United States, it could be now Germany, yung steam engine natin, Industrial Revolution. Lahat yan ay Western, quote-unquote, northern countries, no? It could also be in terms of culture, di ba? Pop culture, entertainment, Hollywood, di ba? Food, di ba? Your McDonald's. Those could now posit all about the dominance when it comes to modernization of the global northern countries. No, we have Arturo Escobar. So very unfamiliar name, but basically we know his context. No, so he classified that the world is divided into your developed, and your underdeveloped, or rather in a ranking form, you're developing, then you're underdeveloped. Now he argues, no, or criticizes, about this one. He refers basically the three continents of South America, Africa, then Asia. So going back to the map now. So yung map natin, no, Latin, Africa, then Asia, they are now global South, no, are considered to be underdeveloped and in need of significant change to achieve progress. Yan. We have Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization. Di ko alam kung ano yung na-mention ko. I have mentioned the Clash of Civilization several times. Although if this is the first time that I will be mentioning Samuel Huntington. Ang sinasabi kasi ni Huntington is there are 8 classifications of civilization. Where we have the Western, the Scenic. When we talk about the Scenic, this would now be the Japanese, the Chinese. We also have the Islamic, the African, etc. No? I'll just pop it up. So may 8 classifications ng civilization dito sa mundo. No? And these civilizations, because they are different with one another, when they encountered with one another, tendency nagkaroon ng cultural clash. And this would now will now result to a backward civilization. And in an idea or in a theoretical point of view, yung mga nasa very least civilized nations natin would now be yung mga African, your Asian, yung mga Scenic Islamic natin, no. Yan. Francis Fukuyama. So kay Francis Fukuyama, this is a very interesting literature sa political science, no. So yung argument dito ni Francis Fukuyama, the endpoint of mankind's ideological evolution and the universalization of Western liberal democracy as the final form of human government. Now basically ang gusto niya sabihin dito liberal democracy has been dominantly spread by Western or Northern countries, yung mga European countries natin, then yung United States natin to be specific. Again, Northern states, who will now dominantly shape up the global order. Now, so more likely nakita natin ngayon, medyo talunan na naman yung mga Southern countries natin. No? Again, kasi yun yung point of view of global South. It's more likely all about stratification between a powerful region then a less powerful region. Then we have Thomas Friedman's metaphor of Lexus. So more likely articulates global progress in terms of a binary. So binary, medyo dalawa yan, no? Between embracing free trade and left behind the pace of international economic and technological developments. So again, who are left behind? Global South na naman. Then Manfred Steger of globalism. So more likely, we have actors of agents who will now promote globalization as the current political or rather global political ideology. Those who will now not follow globalization as an ideology are basically left behind. And who are left behind? African countries. More likely, isisisi na naman natin sa global South. Well, that's the point. Kasi when we talk about stratification, yun yung argument. North are more developed than South are less developed, which is the ugly part. No? However, now, I'm talking about dito, no, yung theories would now be basically where global North has started, while challenging the colonial order, which is basically this is our the colonial orders, we now gives now a justification or justice towards your global South na it's our return, it's now the comeback, haters, that kami ngayon yung aasenso when we talk about globalization, hindi lang kayong global North, which is already presented in the idea of Mawdsley, na may kakayahan din kaming mag-develop mga Southern countries. And once na-develop kami, yung tulungan namin, it's not based on superiority or inferiority complexity. Tutulungan namin kayo kasi gusto namin lahat na kasama namin sa South ay masenso. So yun yung main gist dito sa part ng slide natin. And we could now see the comeback of your global South. South pagdating dito kay Benedict Anderson. You have encountered this, lalo na yung sa Rizal or sa history subjects natin, no? Wherein we have your former colonies, which is generalized in your global southern countries na kaya nating kalabanin yung mga northern countries natin, yung mga former colonial masters natin such as US, such as Spain, United Kingdom. So where it is where resistance of your southern countries would now resist against Spanish colonial. Di ba? Kasi yung mga Spaniards natin are one of the main imperial forces, yung mga colonial forces natin during yung age of colonialism or exploration natin. In Latin America and the Philippines, we could now see Philippines resisting against Spain. We have revolutions in Peru, in Brazil, di ba? From Cuba, di ba? We have your socialist internationalism, di ba? More likely, this is now a Marxist point of view, di ba? Wherein yung mga colonial powers natin, usually yung Western countries natin, would now resist against yung mga imperial countries natin. Again, and they are located at your Western countries, or your Communist International, no? Which is led by one of my idols, sorry, medyo leftist ako by Vladimir Lenin, di ba? Wherein Lenin will now establish yung third internationalism. But just to provide you a gist, ang sinasabi kasi ni Lenin when he now established now yung Bolshevik or yung October Revolution natin sa Russia. Now, di ba yung mga komunista against sa mga kapitalista natin, sa mga kapitalist na now establishing now yung USSR, Lenin has now advocate or has this wider vision na we will now spread communism. And technically, when we talk about communism against any capitalistic entities, quote-unquote, even countries or imperialism, we will now help yung mga colonized countries natin, which are dominantly located in your southern countries na to resist yung mga colonial masters natin. Kasi yun yung, yung mga capitalistic entities natin. So, we'll now talk colonial, he will now collaborate or talk with your countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia, no, kaya doon din na-influence si Ho Chi Minh, no, to resist against yung mga Vietnamese colonizers yan, no. Then we also have United Nations, no. Basically yung argument sa United Nations is during year 1945, unti-unti nang medyo na-decolonize. When we talk about decolonize, nagiging independent na yung isang bansa against his colonizers, no? So more likely it has been defended by international law. Then we have this Bandung Conference. No, this Bandung Conference has been Bandung is a city in Indonesia, no? Wherein we have Sukarno, who is the president of Indonesia. He invited 29 Asian and African countries to provide a pan-African or a pan-Asian conference or community or an organization. So, hindi nakasali dito yung mga Western or nation countries na I will now call you and we will now cooperate because we now have this sentiment going back kay Mawdsley na we have this empathy. We are now former colonies. We experience the exploitation done or committed by our former colonial masters, which are northern states. Now it's time to cooperate through a developmental partnership. And we could now provide this idea na hindi natin kailangan yung mga Western countries. Now medyo mabilis but I hope na-gets nyo yung gist ng ating Global South. Now basically, just to end this one, wherein I have to go back kay Mawdsley, nakikita na ngayon natin na that your southern countries are now developing or not basically being independent. Nakikita natin yun yung rise ng ating mga southern countries, especially your BRICS. So I hope that's it, guys. Medyo may natutunan kayo, no? So that is now Global South. Okay, guys, so thank you. What's up?